Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We know that most of the content that you are listening to on the Emerge Workplace these couple of days has been for medium and larger size employers. We're really excited in this session to bring you a perspective of small business owners and highlight how they're thinking about creating financial health for their employees. We know small businesses are the anchor of the U.S. economy, employing nearly half of America's workforce. But without the scale and resources of larger companies, how do smaller businesses best promote the financial health of their employees? Pacific Community Ventures, which I work for, is a nonprofit community development financial institution that really tries to center its civil rights mission and invests in small businesses with a focus on helping create good jobs through good businesses. I'm excited to be joined this morning for a coffee and cupcakes fireside chat with one of our favorite clients, Lila Owens from Cupcakin Bake Shop here in the East Bay, who really exemplifies a small business using this community investment models, capital, and advising to innovate her workplace, invest in good jobs, and the financial health of her workers. Lila, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Bulbul, for having me.
Yeah, we'd love to hear how you got started on your journey as an entrepreneur. And I'd love to understand, where did that first awareness for you really come from about wanting to create good jobs for your team, and how did you work towards that? What do you offer these days?
Great questions. So I'll start with the beginning of this entrepreneurial venture. I graduated from Howard University in 1999, and I was unsure about my career path. And so I returned home from Washington, D.C. to join our family real estate business. I did really well, and I was in the industry for, 10 plus years before we had the big economic downturn circa 2008. And I took that time to do some soul searching. It was a time for me to discover, is this really what I want to do? Or is this the good opportunity for me to look into other careers? And so I had a cooking club with a group of friends, and I was always assigned to pastry. And I absolutely loved cupcakes. And perfect storm was that cupcake shops were popping up around the country. And I was like, this is exciting. So I would literally travel the country, touring different bakeries and cupcake shops. And I really honed into this interest of pastry. I went home and perfected my craft, worked on the chemistry of pastry, and literally started a business right there in my home kitchen. That was 2010. In 2013, I used my real estate background to acquire a lease for our first location. So that was how we started. We're now at 4 locations in the Bay Area. And so we are a growing small business. In terms of how I view good jobs and my awareness around that came from my experience being the sole proprietor and wearing so many different hats. So I know what it's like to be in prep. I know what it's like to be in production. I know what it's like to be the driver. And I wanted my staff to have a good work experience, to work in an area they actually wanted to be in. And I know baking can either be therapeutic or if it can be overwhelming. I wanted them to have more of a therapeutic experience and come to work wanting to be there, enjoying the experience, and liking the culture and the environment. So it's very intentional about creating a space for them that was well-balanced in terms of their workload and just a good environment, lighthearted and a friendly culture. So very intentional about creating that space.
Nice. And tell us a little bit, it sounds like you really had empathy for your workers being, starting off in all of those functions. So what is it that you provide these days for your team?
Good question.
And how have you worked towards that maybe? We know, for small businesses, for example, it really comes down to that monthly and quarterly sort of financial planning often of what can I afford this month? What can I, plan for next quarter based on the runway that you have? So how did you think through that, and what did you end up, being able to offer?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we do, as a small business, have to look at our budget monthly to determine what is it that we can afford to do for staff, even if it's a First Friday luncheon or if it's new T-shirts. They appreciate the small things. In our break room, we have all types of snacks. So we do the little perks, but we also have benefits. We also provide parking. So rather than them having to pay for parking, the company will front that cost for them. We try to put their schedule out in time, so we honor their work-life balance and not just last minute. Even though it's COVID and most people are home, we still are mindful of the fact that maybe you just want to be home. So things like that. I think also us being collaborative and checking in on their needs. If we have like a new position that's available, allowing the opportunity for promotion before we bring someone from the outside. So small considerations like that. When I first started out, we really didn't have, the money for perks. And so we would do just little small things like free cupcakes, 1 free cupcake per day. So things like that are small, but they add up and they're meaningful for the staff. So on a small business level, it's a little bit more about being impactful, even if it's a small gesture.
Mm-hmm. So we know how important stable scheduling is for workers, not just for wanting to be home or work-life balance, but also to be able to plan childcare, know what kind of predictive income they're going to have in the coming months. That really adds to their financial stability. But, I think you're maybe being a bit modest here. You do a lot to engage your workers to really create a fair and engaging workplace, which is also one of the elements we really talk about with our small businesses around what it means to be a good job, good business sort of owner. You provide, I think it's health and dental and vision, right?
So you provide health, dental, and
vision.
vision.
Benefits for a small business your size. And I know that when you think about sort of regular reviews with your team and looking at sort of how you move from lower cost interventions to being able to offer things that really contribute to their wealth building, how do you start to think towards like what is that wish list of financial health for your workers that you're working towards? What would you like to see in your workplace?
Yeah, so what I would love to see is profit sharing. And part of the reason why is because I know that ultimately it's our staff who are fueling the growth of our business, right? All of the hard work that they're doing behind the scenes, I want them to reap the benefits of the growth of the company. And so that's like our larger goal. Also 401k feels like we'd be super official once we can offer them like a tool for their future growth and retirement. And so those are two of our things that are on our big picture wish list as we grow. These aren't even things that, they've asked of us, but it's things that we definitely want to provide for the sake of stability and, retention and having them feel like this is a place where they can actually grow. A lot of times in retail, it feels like a transitional job, not a place where you can really plant your feet because there's not room for growth and stability and things like 401k and a profit sharing. So that's what we would love to provide.
Nice. That's great. That definitely covers a lot of the different elements we work with our small business owners around the elements of having a good job. So when you think about the journey you've been on, how does access to affordable capital or mentorship factor into the either improvements you've been able to make in your business and then in the jobs that you offer and the quality of the jobs that you offer? How has that played a role?
Sure. So affordable capital is everything. It takes the pressure off, the financial pressure off when you have a reasonable when you have a reasonable monthly payment for a loan that you've acquired, right? Like when we started out, we had to acquire less favorable loans. And there was so much pressure to make that payment. It's hard to think about growing the business because you want to make sure that you fulfill this obligation that you have. So not until we got into the position where those loans were paid off, we were able to get, a reasonable interest rate for capital with PCV. And then it's like, okay, we can focus on getting a new laptop or, things that we need for the business that is not tied up in an interest payment. So the affordable capital just as a small business is instrumental in our growth, and as well as advising. We've also gotten a PCV advisor who's been amazing and had me focusing on the growth of myself as a CEO and improving my leadership skills, the efficiency of the business, the effectiveness of our leadership team. He was instrumental in determining my model as we grew from 1 location to 3. And I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said. So just the two combined have been pillars in our growth as a small business. I would say the mentorship is invaluable, and I was lucky to get a mentor that completely aligned with my vision for the business and helped me to strategize, going from, like I said, from 1 location to where we are now. I had to determine what kind of business model I was going to decide upon, and that was going from having 1 kitchen to a model where we have a centralized location or a hub and satellite locations, as opposed to multiple locations that have multiple kitchens, which is far more expensive to operate. So just making decisions like that and helping us be more efficient, those have been major decisions that kind of shaped the growth of our business.
That's great to hear. And since you started working with PCV about 4 or 5 years ago, you've worked with a couple of different advisors, right? And tell me a little bit about so beyond thinking about the sort of hub and spoke business model, your leadership skills, which obviously really plays into the culture you build in that workplace, how has the advisor helped you think about that leadership culture and how that plays into the kinds of job quality elements that you offer in your workplace?
Yeah, good question. So there's a couple of questions there. So first I'll start with our initial advisor was out of New York, and his name is Robert, and he's amazing. And for the first couple of years in business, he guided me along a lot. He was more financial focused, so he helped us with organizing our bookkeeping and tracking our cash flow, things of that nature that were very important for us as a startup. He had obligations outside of advising that didn't allow him to continue, and so we were assigned a new advisor. And I had a couple meetings with him, but I didn't think he fully aligned with my style, my vision. And so I contacted PCV and I was like, is it possible I can be realigned with another advisor? And so the advisor who I have now, Mark Sickles, is absolutely amazing. I feel like I should be paying him. He has been like so instrumental in just getting us from, A to Z. He is focused a lot on the culture. We're focusing on making Cupcakin a great place to work, a great place to buy, and a great place to invest. Those are our 3 pillars. And so we work consistently on finances, on marketing, on branding, on the culture of the company, and making sure that our staff, who we consider our first customer, are, happy with their workload, with their job, with their work experience, with their buy-in, with the collaboration. And so he just keeps me focused. And there was a second part of your question that I don't think I answered yet.
No, I was just thinking about, I mean, you're talking about the leadership culture piece. Obviously, that translates into creating a good business where people want to work and are inspired to work. I was just thinking about, how does that specifically play out into how that advisor has helped you sort of plan through, like, okay, this month I can do this for my workers, next quarter I can do something else, and how that combination, we find usually that it's a combination of financial planning and HR thinking, right? So what is the culture you want to build and how do you finance your way there? So I was just trying to think through sort of how that advisor has been particularly helpful in doing a combination of both.
Yeah, absolutely a combination of both. And I'll say there have been very specific issues that I brought to my advisor, let's just say in terms of human resources. How we transition people in and out of the business, and being super mindful about that process. For example, it was time to hire a GM, and, what we brainstormed is that it's only fair to present that opportunity to all of leadership and let them step up and also contend for the position rather than having an outsider come in. There were times where I needed to transition people out, and he and I came up with a plan to have basically a corrective action plan before you transition anybody out, to give them 90 days to improve their performance. So these were things that I hadn't thought about. I was just like, it's not working out. What do I do? But you have to be mindful for the sake of the culture to consider, how you bring people on and how you transition people out. So things like that helped me work through specifically. Other HR things like creating an actual position called a quality manager. That was something that we worked through. The quality manager was basically coming in to determine the quality of all things Cupcakin. What are the quality of the products? What are the quality of the processes? What are the quality of the people? So those are things we worked through that I probably wouldn't have done on my own. In terms of the finances, he basically allows me to come up with a financial plan, and it's something that, in terms of creating strategy, he wants to just make sure I'm managing risk. And so he oversees a lot of what I'm doing, but he will allow me to first come up with a plan, and then sort of overview and review and assist me with its implementation.
Nice. That's a good coaching style. I like that.
It is.
And I love the idea of that quality assurance manager looking across product and culture. That's definitely something I'm going to think about in one of my next hires I'm looking at. Thanks for that advice for me. So I know you definitely are a great place to work and a great place to buy. Your cupcakes have been a part of all of my kids' and staff's birthdays and events since we met. I think since we started working together in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And they are delicious. We hope if the conference is ever able to be out in the Bay Area, we are happy to cater cupcakes for everybody for a future Emerge conference. What is, in the minute or so we have left, what is one takeaway you want to make sure other small business owners who are thinking about, how do I finance good jobs in my workplace? How do I invest in good jobs for my workers? What do you want them to be thinking about?
I think know that investing in your workers is a huge return on your investment. I think that, people first, and then everything else second. I definitely think it's worth it to invest in the staff that are working on your behalf. At Cupcakin, we have a very low turnover rate. People love to work for us. I think that's a rewarding experience. So just that giving back to those who contribute to, the growth of your business, I think it's just the right thing to do. And I think it'll ultimately be a good return on your investment.
Nice. Thanks, Lila. I just always appreciate and learn something every time we talk. And I think from the PCV perspective, even though our small business lending is only available for California-based businesses, I think one thing I want to make sure people also walk away from is that our advising platform, businessadvising.org, is nationwide. So if you're a small business or you work with small businesses and you want to be able to offer them the kinds of advisors Lila's raving about, Mark Sickles and other good jobs advisors or financial planning advisors, please feel free to use that resource. We'd love to be able to get that in the hands of more folks to help them build forward better, so that we're really shaping a recovery that is much more worker-centric than we did maybe even the last recession, so that we're able to actually have the kinds of wealth and financial health, wealth building outcomes we know we are intending to have and are going to be important to lift up our communities again. So thank you so much for joining me for this morning's conversation. I can't wait to see you in Oakland.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.